Welcome back to Live Impact News here on WCNC Plus. I'm Julie Kay here, now joined by WFMY's Logan Campbell. And Logan, thank you for hopping on last minute, obviously under this tragic situation. But your expertise here in sports, I think, is going to really help us paint a picture of how tragic this is. I was just talking to one of our digital producers, Nathaniel, a bit earlier about how involved the families are in the NASCAR community. So I would love just to get your initial thoughts as someone who has covered this firsthand.
Julie Kay, I just wish I was joining on better circumstances. You know, this has been such a tough month in the world of racing with this happening and then Greg Biffle happening earlier this month. It has truly just been so terrible. And, you know, I think right now the racing community is just trying to wrap their heads around the two devastating tragedies that have happened over these last couple of weeks. You know, obviously with the news that Denny Hamlin's dad did die in this house fire. It's terrible. You know, I've been scrolling through social media and I've seen multiple current NASCAR drivers tweeting out, just giving their thoughts and prayers to the Hamlin family. You know, Connor Zilic just tweeted out what a horrible few weeks it's been for our racing community. Kyle Larson, another prolific name in NASCAR, tweeted out, our thoughts and prayers are with the Hamlin family and their loved ones. And one thing that I've seen from all these drivers is just how loved Denny's dad was in the racing community. I know that you've mentioned a few times, I've been listening in, Julie Kay, and you said just how tight-knit the racing community is, and they truly are. You know, their families become everyone's family. They know everything about the dads, the mothers, the wives, the siblings, the kids, and when something happens to someone in the racing community, it affects everyone.
Now, I know you're already kind of seeing reaction from the NASCAR community on social media. Of course, we knew when this fire initially happened that it was owned by the Hamlin family, and this is just a tragic update that we were, you know, all hoping to not get. We also, though, have not heard from the Hamlin family themselves. So for you, as someone who reports on this, what is your next step in terms of who do you reach out to? Who do you talk to someone about the legacy that Dennis Hamlin will leave behind?
Yeah, I think, you know, you obviously are going to respect and wait for Denny to release his own statement. You know, he was one of the first people to speak out when Greg Biffle passed away a few weeks ago. So I'm sure he will release a statement over the next coming days. NASCAR did release a statement. Let me pull that up for a second and read what they said. But they released a statement about his death. And you're just waiting to see what other drivers start pouring in. You contact people that race with Denny, his crew chief, people that work very closely with him, just about the impact, because his dad was very much so involved in his career. There's been countless times. Denny has never shied away from talking about his dad and how much of an impact his dad has had on his career. You know, a few years ago, he came out and said, I wouldn't be in this position in the NASCAR Cup Series if it wasn't for my dad. His dad took out the loan on their house in Virginia. He maxed credit cards because racing is such an expensive sport, but he poured everything he could into Denny Hamlin and his racing career to help him get to where he is today and give him all those resources. And, you know, it's just, obviously as a dad, you want your son to be successful, and you know, Denny has spent so much time giving back to his dad. So I just can't even imagine what his family is going through right now, especially with Christmas just wrapping up and the New Year coming through. I just can't even imagine. So you want to respect their privacy and wait a little bit, but you also want to just see how everyone on that team is feeling at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a touchy situation. And you've touched on this a few times too, but 2 weeks now after the death of Greg Biffle and his family, I'm sure this is just compounding into a whole terrible amount of grief in the community. Where does NASCAR go from here? This is not just to NASCAR legends, but also to really important people in the North Carolina community.
Right. That's a great question, Julie Kay, because I don't know. Obviously, these are such tragic events that you don't ever see happening. A house fire and a plane crash, and you never know when it is going to be your last day. And I think, NASCAR will start by paying tributes, doing certain things to pay their respects, not only to Dennis Hamlin, Denny's dad, but also to Greg Biffle and his family. they're starting to slowly start doing things for the Biffle family, and I'm sure they're going to do everything they can and pay their respects to Dennis however Denny sees fit. But of course, everyone just is taking the time to process this because it's just two horrific, unexpected things that have happened back to back, it seems like.
Logan, I know this is a developing situation. I mean, we just got this in the last 45 minutes or so into our newsroom, and so there's a lot of questions that remain, and it's kind of hard to talk about when it's so heartbreaking but also so fresh. Is there anything we haven't talked about yet that you think people need to know about the situation, or that you just want to get out there?
I think the one thing that, is kind of people are holding on to is his mom. Although she is in critical condition, she is in a hospital in Winston-Salem. You want to think positively and think that everything's going to be okay with her. But of course, like you said, this is a developing situation. So, thoughts and prayers are just really with the Hamlin family and hoping that Denny's mom does end up being okay and does end up stabilizing. But right now she is in critical condition. NASCAR did release a statement. They have a whole article online, just talking about how much Denny's dad poured into his career to help get him to where he is today. And just the impact that he's had not only with Denny, but with the sport and with several other drivers in the sport. So it's a really great article just to read up on the type of man that he is. And of course, I'm sure on your guys' newscast tonight and on WFMY's as well, we'll talk a little bit about just the impact that he's had on NASCAR.
I also, as someone who's not a sports expert, something I've learned over the past couple of weeks covering this from the news side of this is how unique NASCAR is in that way of how it's structured, it being so family oriented. The families are so involved. And so, I mean, you touched on it so many times, but I know that this is an impact that's going to reach multiple other drivers as well, and multiple other families here too. So this is just tragic on so many levels.
Right, and unfortunately in NASCAR, it's just part of life, like the parents do end up passing at some point, and no matter how or when, we always see the drivers rallying together, posting social statements just about how great of a human being that man or woman was, not only to their son, but to the racing community, like you just said. As I'm constantly refreshing Twitter, I just see more drivers posting just about how great of a man Dennis Hamlin was and how he's going to be so missed, just being in the pit, walking up and down, saying hi to everyone before races, during practices. He truly was someone that was so involved in the sport and getting to know these drivers and the crew chiefs and just everyone that worked in NASCAR. So it really is not only a loss for Denny Hamlin, but the entire sport itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Logan, I know you've got a lot to do to put this together for your own newscast, so we'll let you go. But thank you so much for joining us on short notice, and good luck in your coverage of this tragic situation.
Thank you so much, Julie Kay. Keep up the great work covering this.
You too. We're going to take another quick break here, but stick with us. We're going to get back to all the important coverage, everything we know so far in this heartbreaking situation.